All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast. We're recording on the Monday evening here for our Wednesday drop for March 22nd. And just a reminder at home, we're obviously in our 2 weeks here now as we progress through our off season that we're not recording every single week, but we record once every 2 weeks and trying to do a little bit of a recap of where we're at. Obviously, right now we're at the NFL free agency and kind of that little bit of a period as we progress into the off-season period leading up to draft time. So before we get started here, we'll say hello to Zach. We're a man down, this week. Armin and his family are taking care of a few things there with one of their kids was not doing great there. So Armin's taking care of the family this week and just leaves me and Zach here to take care of business. So Zach, last couple of weeks, it's been keeping you busy.
Well, we'll be talking a lot about it today, but free agency's been keeping me quite busy. I've been a pretty absentee teacher and husband the past week, just trying to get in as much screen time as I can. I've probably spent, I don't know, I bet if I looked at my screen time on my phone, maybe double to what I do normally, just refreshing and searching players' names and really being an internet sleuth, trying to find out anything I can about people that are visiting the Pats, people that the Pats sign, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, between that and March Madness, it's been a busy it's been a busy week for sure. I don't know if you've been touched into the March Madness at all, but that's consumed a lot of my screen time. It seems like looking at free agency on my phone and March Madness on the TV. It seems like this last couple days. But I had my last class for this like set of classes for this last one here. So I'm done classes now until July, and then in July I'll finish my last two classes and I'll be completely done my master's. So it was a catch 22 because I was happy that classes are done, but I had to sit through class the entire weekend when it was really nice weather this past weekend. But happy to be talking about football, that's for sure.
So then, do you have to do your like your major capstone over the
Capstone, yeah.
summer? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna start that right away here. We already got the information and what it needs to encompass and whatnot. And as you know, it's not the shortest of projects, that's for sure. So I'm gonna try and get a jump start on that here, but we'll see what that entails, that's for sure. Getting things going here. We'll start with the insider, or sorry, before we get to insiders and headlines, sorry, we'll get the 22 fresh quick question of the week, and this one's a fun one. And I could almost do a whole episode of this kind of segment, I guess. But the whole premise of what the offseason is, it seems like, is buy low, sell high. That's kind of what the whole dynasty offseason seems like, at least. And everybody trying to get the drop or the scoop on somebody before that, the perceived value of that player skyrockets or drops or what have you. So for this 22 fresh quick question of the week, we're going to focus on that. And the question is, right now, who is somebody that you either see like as a buy low or a sell high? And that window is right now, because coming up to draft season, that it could get diminished or skyrocket to the point where either you can't sell that player or you can't buy that player. And I'm curious to see. We'll start with Zach here. Who's somebody that is that perceived buy low or sell high? And that window you can see closing come draft season.
So in a few months, I might be having a pie on my face for this one, but I'm interested in selling high on Terrace Marshall. Right now, arguably wide receiver one for the Carolina Panthers, especially after the Panthers only signing Thielen and not Shark, who they both had in for visits the past couple of days. So with DJ Moore gone, I think a lot of people might consider Terrace Marshall as a breakout candidate. The GM there in Carolina spoke quite glowingly about Marshall at the combine when his name was brought up. But Marshall is somebody that has had two less than spectacular seasons while he's in the NFL. And granted, he's had less than superb quarterback play. But if I could sell him right now to somebody that's just trying to get ahead of the curve and take advantage of the barren receiving room in Carolina, I would consider doing that quite quickly, I think. EJ Chark, Adam Thielen, they don't really scare me, but the 39th overall pick in the upcoming draft does give me some pause. I could see a situation where one of those top 3 or 4 wide receivers falls to the beginning of the second round, and the Panthers might pounce on that player, whether it be a Quentin Johnson, a Zay Flowers, the guy out of SC,
Addison.
Jordan Addison. I think, yeah, somebody like that slips a little bit. I wouldn't be shocked if they made a play for him.
It's a good point. And there's a lot of things that have to go right for his value to maintain where it's at. Like, there's a lot of, as soon as people are talking about the names, then there's a perceived increase of value because everybody's talking about him. So you hear his name, hear his name, hear his name. It's like, okay, if I'm going to start trying to make some trades, I'm looking around and whose name have I been seeing a lot? Oh, okay, well, I've been seeing this name a ton, and I've been seeing it because of these reasons, like you mentioned. There's a lot of things people forget, that there's a lot of things that have to go right for him to be successful, and just because he's the perceived one doesn't mean it's going to pan out. Because look, like you said, look what he's done the last couple of years. It's not like we have a guy like, for example, a wide receiver that's been mediocre or above average with bad quarterback play, and all of a sudden gets really good quarterback play. I'm thinking like an example of like Stephon Diggs, where he was above average, like a very good wide receiver, but not like incredibly great. And then he goes to get Josh Allen. All of a sudden, he's a locked and loaded wide receiver one. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a guy that's been a wide receiver 5 or 6 at best, that might be able to climb up to a wide receiver 2, 3. So if you can capitalize on that value, like you mentioned, I think that's something that's definitely worth doing. Mine here is kind of the same boat as you. You said, this is one of those ones where you could turn around and you could look like an idiot by doing so. But we talked about it last episode 2 weeks ago, when there was the franchise tagging of Tony Pollard and the conversations of what's going to happen with Zeke. And everybody thought, well, because they franchise tagged him, they're going to obviously keep Zeke around. And we'll get to a little bit here that Zeke is moving on, or the team has moved on from Zeke. That now Tony Pollard is the guy. And if you've been a Tony Pollard manager, you've been holding on to this moment forever, i.e. Zach. We talked about this. You were rather excited about Tony Pollard possibly being the guy to carry the load on your dynasty team, and had him on for a long time. But now he is the guy, and there's no way that Dallas is going to go into the season with just Tony Pollard. They already had a quote of Jerry Jones, and I shared it 2 weeks ago, that Jerry Jones said that they're really interested in and possibly would take a running back in the first round. Now, I think it's their I want to say they're the 26th pick in the draft. I can't remember off the top of my head. I'm going to have to quickly vet that. But do I think that that the number one, everybody's pretty excited about this big dynasty pick, this big Bijan Robinson? Do I think he's going to get to the 26th? It's hard to say. But there's a couple other running backs I think are sneaky to be later in the first round or early second rounders as well. So the chances of them going into the season with just Tony Pollard is pretty unlikely. And right now, the value is probably not going to get any higher of Pollard, and he's still got to recover from a knee injury. So right now, I think if I could be flipping that into a high end first round pick, or maybe a veteran running back that's a lot more proven and a lot more steady, like, I know there's a lot of uncertainty like around Dalvin Cook right now. Maybe that's something that you could try and get done if you're a win now type team, or even, Dalvin Cook and picks. It's because of the said uncertainty. That's something that I'd be looking to do, even though Tony Pollard on what they're going to transition to this run first offense. I just can't see it being Tony Pollard only. If you look at his snap share over the last couple of years, he's always flirting around that 30-40% of snap shares, and he's an explosive running back. He's not a workhorse running back. So a lot of uncertainty still, like I mentioned, with Tony Pollard, but there's a lot of hype because he is the guy at the moment. But those dreams could get squashed pretty quick come draft season. Would you be interested in moving him, Zach?
Prices well, not to you. That 110 in this draft class isn't too exciting to me. But yeah, I think if somebody came to me in our dynasty, 1 QB, 10 team, and somebody offered me, let's say like 1.7 to 1.5, that would be pretty enticing, because just off the top of my head, yeah, you'd have Bijan Robinson, JSN, I don't know, Flowers, Quentin Johnson, Addison there. Like those are the kind of like the top 5 picks, I think. Then you're looking at the guys like Jamari Gibbs, running back out of Alabama. And then there's just like a total crapshoot at the RB3 to RB5 range.
I don't know. That Charbonneau, I like him quite a bit.
Out of UCLA.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just don't think there's much or as much value as outside of the top 6-7 picks as Tony Pollard could give you. A healthy Tony Pollard could give you.
So that's what I mean. Like if he still has to overcome an injury, and then there's still the likelihood that they bring somebody else in there. But if it's not out of the realm of possibility that somebody's going to be offering you that mid to early-ish first-round pick in a single Q league, and to me, like that's something that I'd be taking to the bank for sure, because we haven't really seen Tony Pollard by himself, and I don't think you're going to see him by himself. And we don't know how many guys have we seen come back healthy from a knee injury? Lots. But how many guys have we seen that lose a step or it takes a long period of time to come back? Plenty of that. So I know there's even it's a crapshoot in the rookie draft too, but that rookie draft has its own perceived value that when the draft comes, you can flip that into something bigger or whatever. Like I said, you can get a veteran RB that's been dynamite, that's been unbelievable over the last couple of years with draft capital, and that's a pretty likely possibility. Like even like a guy like Derrick Henry, he's super old, and if you're a Derrick Henry manager, the chances are you probably want to get rid of him because he's on his last legs. But in that situation, you probably get Derrick Henry in a pick or Derrick Henry in a prospect for Tony Pollard, because everybody's talking about him. Everybody's talking about the situation, about the Cowboys and Zeke gone, and okay, that means Pollard's the guy. That window will be closing. I can promise you that. There's no way they just go into the season with Tony Pollard alone. Speaking of, I guess we kind of dropped a few little pieces of news and whatnot, but maybe we'll get into that. And for those of you at home, like we mentioned it before, the off season is a little bit different. I promise that every episode in the off season isn't just talking about insiders and headliners, but this is our free agency recap episode. There's a lot that's happened in this last 2 weeks from the moment we stopped recording 2 weeks ago to, well, even now, even we're about to start recording, Devin Singletary signs a deal. So it's continuously ongoing. Even after we finish recording, there's still going to be some signings. There's still some names that are out there. There's the Lamar Jackson saga that I think is starting to heat up. We're getting some rumors that are coming out in Twitter a little bit more today. So there'll be lots of stuff that are happening, but we're going to give you the quick recap of what has happened so far in free agency, and then a couple of our favorite signings and not so great signings. We'll give a couple grade values to a few of them. So without further ado, we'll get to our insiders and headliners today.
I've just been handed an urgent and horrifying news story.
I'm Ron Burgundy.
Well, the first one we'll talk about, I think, was the fact that Zach had the inside scoop on this one. I was getting my skate sharpened last weekend, and all of a sudden Zach goes, "Wow, boys, you guys see that trade?" I was like, "No, first overall pick's gone." No, I was looking through trying to figure out where on Twitter or what social media platform Zach found it, and then finally, about maybe 5 minutes, not quite 5 minutes later, all the the TSNs, the sleeper platforms, all the other platforms were sharing all the information about this tweet. So I don't know where Zach found the information first, but seemingly he had the inside scoop, I guess. But Chicago Bears trade the first overall pick, which I think for the most of us, we saw this coming. But I think the first thing I said to Zach was I didn't see it coming this quick. Like I kind of assumed that Chicago would hold out until the draft was getting closer, or like moments before the draft when they could get the most value. But I think the conversation that we had was, how did they not say yes to this deal for what Chicago was getting in return? So they gave it the first overall pick. They got the 9th pick this year, so that was the position where Carolina was in. And they also got the 61st pick in this upcoming draft. They got a 2024 first, a 2025 second, and they also got wide receiver DJ Moore, who was kind of that stalwart, steady Eddie kind of wide receiver in Carolina. So a huge return for 101, and now the speculations of who the team's going to take. I know the quarterback coach has already kind of come out and said, who he likes and why he likes players, not necessarily for the 101, just a guy that he's really excited about. But now the speculation begins, and Zach, this is one I'm curious from your perspective, do you think, like, I know we talked about, like, how do you not say no to that, but do you think if Chicago holds out a little bit more and they start kind of catching wind of what teams are offering, that maybe they could have got a little bit more? But to me, I think that Chicago definitely fleeced Carolina in this situation.
Yeah, I think the hard part for me, I guess in value here is DJ Moore. I think it would be quite possible for a lot of teams to offer them an early pick swap this year, an additional first, and then maybe a third first. But here you got the pick swap this year going from 1 to 9, next year's first, and then a couple of seconds. But DJ Moore, I think that's the one that really swung it for them. I think for Chicago to make that trade. DJ Moore is better than any receiver that you're going to get this year, and he's a sure thing. So even if going into next year, somebody like Marvin Harrison Jr., receiver out of Ohio State, seems to be pretty slick, but he's not a for sure thing. Whereas DJ Moore is a established NFL receiver. So I think that value was, like you mentioned, too good to pass up. And I don't know if many other teams would be able to offer a similar package where you look at maybe Indy, they could offer, going from 1 to 4, but they'd have to get rid of Pittman. I don't know if you value Pittman or if they value Pittman the same way as DJ Moore. Maybe a team like Oakland, yeah, they could do that, but do they want to take on Devontae Adams? So I think this made a lot of sense for both teams.
Yeah, like DJ Moore is a first round pick. He was drafted 24th position in the 2018 draft. Like, he was a first rounder. And even when you talk about Michael Pittman wasn't a first rounder. He was he early second?
I think so, yeah.
Fifth pick in the second round. Like, people forget that DJ Moore is a really good wide receiver. And just because he hasn't put up the huge fantasy numbers we've seen the last couple of years, he's had terrible quarterback play his entire career. But he hasn't put up these massive, numbers that we're expecting DJ Moore to put up. But he is super important to that offense and was, the go-to target for the quarterback. So it's going to be interesting to see what that dynamic brings for Justin Fields. I don't know if that means a huge fantasy input for DJ Moore, just because the option number one for Chicago is to get it done on the ground. But I still see DJ Moore is going to be the number one target. Darnell Mooney will be probably a close second, and then Chase Claypool somewhere down the line if he's still on this team next year, even though they gave up of the very, very early second rounder for him. But the whole idea, I think we talked about the same thing about Jalen Hurts last year, was you got to find out what you have in him. He got the legs, he's got the capability of busting a 98-yard touchdown at any moment, but can he get it done with his arm? And what did Philadelphia do? Loaded him up with weapons and see what happens. And we saw what happens. Jalen Hurts was a borderline MVP this year. And now we're going to see the same thing with Justin Fields. If he succeeds, they got their guy, they got their weapons. But if he struggles, then they got to make some tough decisions down the road. But you got the weapons to support him, and now it's just find out what Chicago does. And Chicago had a ton of money. Like, I think they had the most amount of money to spend this free agency. And they were actually so low that they literally had to spend money, so they didn't. They would have got fined because they were so under the budget, whatever the amount of money you have to spend. I can't remember. It works over like a 2 or 3 year period. Anyways, regardless, can't remember exactly how the entire the budget works, but a ton of money to spend, and they're getting even strong defensively too. So this is going to be a team that rebuilt pretty quickly, especially if these trades and these early picks kind of pan out for that team. Especially in a division like the NFC North that's completely up for grabs. Like, anybody can win the NFC North next year.
The one thing that I found funny on Monday, a week ago, was that it was rumored that Mike McGlinchey, the right tackle, formerly of the 49ers, was going to sign with the Bears, a position of need for Chicago. And then maybe 20 minutes later, Schefter reports that the Broncos came in and got McGlinchey to sign with them. And it was hard not to laugh because, like you said, Chicago had all this money, and right tackle is a position of need for them, and then they just get beat out financially. Like, they had something like obscene, like over $100 million in cap space. Like, you don't get beat out, in my mind, when you have that kind of money.
especially like I said, a position of need and a position of scarcity around the league. There's not just right tackles coming out of the woodworks.
Yeah, like maybe you don't want to spend. Maybe they didn't want to spend more than that amount on McGlinchey, who maybe they just viewed him as like slightly above average, but you have all that money. Like,
Yeah,
don't pinch pennies
that's where
when you have $100 million to spend.
That's where these teams that have a ton of money, I don't ever understand, just front end load that deal. So it says it's the money against your cap or money against your budget in those first couple of years, but then it's easy to get out of that deal later on in the career. Like you see so many teams that are trying to push the money towards the back end of the deal right now, just so they can try and make it win now situations, and then they'll deal with the cap when it comes. Like the Matt Ryan deal is one of the first ones that comes to mind. But I understood when teams like this, when they have so much money, front end load the crap out of that deal. And then if it doesn't pan out or all of a sudden something else comes down the woodwork, it's just easy to get out of that deal later on when you have less cap space than you do right now. It's something I just don't understand. And obviously I'm not a upper management of an NFL team. I obviously won't understand the ins and outs here, but like you mentioned, like why are you trying to nickel and dime yourself when you have like almost double the second team in line for cap space? It doesn't make much sense to me. Let's keep going through some trades here. Some of them are a little bit on the lesser side down the line here, but this one's an interesting one. The Chargers have granted RB Austin Eckler permission to seek a trade. The two are trying to work out on a deal right now, and the talks have not gone well. So Austin Eckler had requested it, and the permission had been granted. Is this something that you see that might actually happen, Zach, and or do you think that a deal will come forward with for Austin Eckler?
Isn't this kind of how Austin Eckler came to be? In a sense,
it's exactly it.
Melvin Gordon was in a contract dispute, and it was Eckler's time to shine.
That's exactly how it happened.
Coming full circle here.
Who's the undrafted running back in Chargers? Go pick him up off the waiver wire because it's going to come full circle.
Yeah. So like right now in front of me, I have Over the Cap open on my phone, and Eckler's only making it. It seems like a base salary of $6.25 million, which certainly I don't think aligns with his value and his play on the field, being one of, if not the top running back right now in the league. But he's going into his age 28 season. Running backs typically don't last much longer, so I see why he wants to go and get paid. I just don't know if other teams are going to be falling over themselves to go and trade for him and then give him a nice big contract with somebody that has missed a game or two here or there with injuries. And then the teams that could afford to do it, the teams with a lot of cap space, they aren't teams that are in positions to succeed. Like we just talked about, Chicago could go get them, but like, you're not there yet as a team.
For what purpose?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's tough sledding to be a running back trying to get paid in the NFL now, especially after teams have learned their lessons on these big, massive contracts, and then the RBs could be out of the league within minutes, like we've seen with some very, very, very fantasy relevant names in the last couple of years. So the Raiders, this is another big one. This one happened, I think it was about 2 or 3 days after we finished recording, but the Las Vegas Raiders have traded tight end Darren Waller to the New York Giants. In return, the Raiders received a 3rd round pick, which is going to be pick 100 in this upcoming draft. So this one's a bit of an interesting one because I know in our tight end frenzy or tight end matchmaker, last one, I was trying not to piece a tight end to the Giants because I was super excited about Bellinger, and I thought Bellinger's kind of the real deal. Had a really, really nice rookie season, and obviously New York Giants thought otherwise on this one. So Waller goes there. This is an interesting one though, in a sense of some of the signings that happened with the Raiders. So I'm curious to see who the Raiders bring in or who they draft or how they try and replace that, because Waller was such a major piece of that offense. Obviously Devontae Adams has kind of taken over as the one in that offense, but that's a team that is struggling for weapons right now too. So I'm curious. They made a couple free agent moves, but I'm curious what they're going to do in the draft, because there's some holes that are going to be filled, especially for Jimmy Garoppolo, who we'll talk about shortly. But I think this is an interesting one for what is that third going to turn into, or what does this team do come draft season, just to try and fill some voids. Another one that happened: Houston Texans traded Brandon Cooks to Dallas. This one happened just a few days ago over the weekend. They received a 5th and 6th round pick. This one fills the void of what Dallas was. They've been kind of pegged to OBJ for it seems like 6-7 months now of OBJ's recovery time, and is he going to go there? Is he going to go there? And now he's ready to go, and his name was in the news and buzzing around for some signings. And no, Brandon Cooks on the move fills that void. And this one, I kind of hemmed and hawed about the buy low, and it's not really a buy low. It's kind of cheating a little bit, but I thought, there might be some worried managers about CeeDee Lamb now that he's not the perceived primary target. Now that Brandon Cooks is there, they're bringing another weapon. Is CeeDee Lamb's target share going to go down? My answer is go buy. If there's somebody that's in your league that's a little concerned about CeeDee Lamb right now, I'd be going to buy. There is the rumors that they're going to be trying to slow the offense down and trying to run the ball a little more. But CeeDee Lamb is an elite talent, and once again, a first-round pick. Those are hard to come by in fantasy football. And if somebody's really worried, I'd be jumping all over that. But are you sharing the similar sentiment there, Zach? I saw you got a little caught off guard by that comment.
Yeah, the CeeDee Lamb part caught me off guard because actually on the way home from work, I was thinking, because I saw your question before I left, and I was kind of brainstorming in the car who should be my buy low or who should be my sell high, and I thought Brandon Cooks would be a really good buy low candidate potentially. So the owner of Cooks might be thinking, okay, he's going to go to Chicago. He's going to go be the number 2 target behind Lamb, etc. Maybe he just won't be getting the volume or the receptions that he was previously in Houston. So I thought he might be a good buy low candidate depending on the feelings of his owner.
And obviously a substantial quarterback upgrade for Brandon Cooks here in the matter of minutes, because went from it was as close to a holdout as you can get. He was just quote unquote injured this entire season, but had very poor quarterback play over the last 2 years. And this year, obviously, injuries aside, the year prior to, he actually had a pretty good season, and it was a PPR machine, and that's kind of been his MO throughout his career. So interesting one there, especially because you might be able to, the two might be eating into each other a little bit here on this perceived value. You might be able to buy low on both of them if whatever, to each your own. Brandon Cook's obviously substantially cheaper than pursuing CeeDee Lamb, but definitely a good offense that you're going to want pieces of regardless.
There weren't many teams that Cooks could go to where it would be a step down in quarterback play.
Yeah. Like who doesn't have a quarterback right now? And like I was gonna say Indianapolis, but I guess they signed Minshew. But there's some teams that it's not like there's very few that are worse off than what Houston was dealing with. A couple small trades. This one was New England traded tight end Juju Smith to Atlanta. They signed Smith and signed Henry the same offseason, if you remember, from going back. So now Juju Smith now is going back to a similar coaching staff that he was united with from back when he was in Arthur Smith, back when he was in Tennessee, now with Atlanta as well. So a little connection there. And then I put this in here. It's going to continue to happen, but the talks between New York Jets and Green Bay about Aaron Rodgers, it's kind of a lot of stuff floating around right now. Still a lot up in the air. We don't really know exactly where we're going with that one. So releases and cuts. Washington Commanders released running back J.D. McKissick. Kind of saw that one coming to do with a lot of injuries that McKissick suffered and was struggling with over the past year and change. And then the Cowboys one, we've talked about that at several lengths now, about the Ezekiel Elliott being moved. I'm just curious on, and we've talked about how that impacts a little bit Tony Pollard quite a bit already, but I'm curious, Zach, just out of thin air here, he's going to end up somewhere. If you had to pick a team or guess a team, where do you think Ezekiel Elliott's going to end up here this upcoming season? If you had to make a random guess.
Buffalo.
I think that'd be not only a good fit, but like good fantasy fit too. Like it's going to help Buffalo, but that's a name where if you have Zeke, I would be maybe trying to sell that if he ends up in Buffalo, because other than touchdowns, Buffalo doesn't run the ball a ton, right? And even in the red zone, they like to throw the ball quite a bit. But I thought maybe on the cheaper side of Denver can get there just with the waiting for Javonte Williams. And right now, Denver seems to be getting all these big names from a handful of years ago, Russell Wilson and even the coaching staff, these big shiny names. So that's one that just seems like maybe something that could be plausible, but it all depends on how much money he's trying to look to get from these teams. But just a fun question. We'll go, I guess, into our signings here. So this is where we're going to get a little bit of fun, and a couple of these we threw a grading scale on. But Zach, you got our first one here. We're going to start by we're going to go by positions here. We'll go quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. And then we'll conclude with Zach's hot take this episode. So you want to start this one off, Zach? We got a quarterback you want to talk about.
So this signing with the Las Vegas Raiders, essentially swapping out Jimmy G and swapping out Derek Carr and bringing in Jimmy G. I gave this a B on the grading scale. Jimmy G is somebody that can come in. He'll likely know the system from his time with McDaniels in New England. He's a pro's pro. He'll come in. He'll seemingly do a job. And the part that I like the most about this signing is it doesn't preclude them from using the 7th overall pick to potentially draft a quarterback this draft. Yeah, likely with the 7th overall pick, I would guess it will be Will Levis, unless something crazy happens and one of those other 3 really drop. But if they were going after Aaron Rodgers, for example, that would presumably prevent them from bringing in that quarterback. And I think when you're in a position to draft a quarterback in the first round, you have to take that opportunity. Like let's look at Washington right now. They had a chance several years ago to draft Tua, to draft Herbert. They went with Chase Young, a great talent, a great player, a great prospect at the time, but they're still in that cycle of trying to find a competent long-term quarterback. And had they just taken one of those 2 when they had the opportunity, I believe their franchise would be at a different spot. So for the sake of the Raiders, I hope they don't make that mistake. So Jimmy G will be a good player for them this year, but not good enough that he'll prevent them from making the right decision in the draft.
Yeah, here's your Detroit Lions talk of the week. But that would have been if that would have happened, like Joe Burrow was the clear cut 101, but then you would have had your pick to whether it been Tua, Herbert, that went 5-6. But the Lions, I was really hoping, and there was like rumors, but it seemed pretty unlikely. But Washington taking Chase Young, that he might have slipped, and that's what I was hoping as a Lions fan that we're going to end up getting. We ended up getting Jeff Okudah, which at the time seemed like a nice little pick. He had a rough start, but had a really good last year. But it took him a bit to become the pro in the NFL. But that would have been unbelievable as a Lions fan. I remember watching that, and it was during COVID, so there wasn't much a guy could do. I remember having a pizza and sitting there watching and thinking, "Oh, come on, baby, make it happen." And obviously, we know what happened in the 2020 draft, but that would have made it a pretty interesting, especially with Miami. That was the quote unquote tanking for Tua, and all of a sudden they get the 105 and get beat to Tua, and they would have had Herbert, and apples to oranges here. Who's better? I guess you can argue whichever you want, but that have made that draft a lot more interesting. Speaking of Miami, they ended up signing Mike White. This is an interesting one. Mike White said I was waiting around for this whole Rodgers saga to conclude, and then if the Jets miss out, then they're like, oh hey, Mike White, here's your contract. He just went out, got paid, and this is I think a really good spot for him, because obviously with the injury history, talking about Tua here, the injury history that he's had, there's a greater than likely chance that he ends up playing a couple games here and there, or if not, if Tua, knock on wood, God forsake, that his injuries become so bad that he's unable to play in the NFL any longer, that Mike White would just become the starter on a really good offense and a team that's high up on the Super Bowl possible rankings here. So I think this was a really good signing for him, and I didn't grade this one, but it's one of those ones I think that's worth mentioning, that this was a really good signing. Mike White to a 2-year, $16 million deal. And then a whole whack of like backup quarterbacks got signings this year, which was crazy. Let's go through them kind of quickly. Sam Darnold signs a 1-year deal with San Francisco. Jarrett Stidham, signs a 2-year deal, $10 million in Denver as their backup quarterback. Jameis Winston does the same, signs as a backup deal, but staying in New Orleans. This one, 1-year, $8 million deal. Taylor Heineke, who we were talking about, the Washington Commanders previously, he has signed a deal with Atlanta, and this was a higher end-up deal. It was worth upwards of $20 million over 2 years, which seems kind of expensive as a backup, but it was clear in the press conference that he is not going to be the starting quarterback. He will be the backup, but an opportunity for Taylor Heineke to possibly find himself back in a starting position like he has the last 3 seasons with Washington. Tampa Bay Buccaneers signed quarterback Baker Mayfield to a 1-year deal worth up to $8.5 million. So I guess him and Kyle Trask will go toe-to-toe here in the offseason to find out who will be the starting quarterback for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. PJ Walker signs a backup deal with the Chicago Bears. And then Gardner Minshew signs a deal with the Indianapolis Colts. And that's an interesting one, too, because that's a team that needs a quarterback. The rumors are that they're going to sign a quarterback or they're going to draft a quarterback, looking like most likely Anthony Richardson or whoever else kind of drops out of those 3. And Anthony Richardson is one of those ones that's been the talk is he NFL ready? And if you feel at Indianapolis he's not NFL ready, you want to give him time to produce, or even halfway through the year he takes over. Gardner Minshew is a very competent quarterback to be able to get you over that hump. Maybe it's a 1 year, maybe it's a 6-month stint as the starting quarterback, but we've seen Gardner Minshew find a lot of success in the NFL. So I think this is a really good deal for not only Gardner, but for the Indianapolis Colts as well. Getting into the running backs, Matt Breida re-signs with New York Giants to be a pain in my ass of my Saquon Barkley shares and the goal line that Matt Breida continuously stole over the last little bit. But one that I'm pretty excited about to talk about, and maybe not necessarily for fantasy football, but for the Miami Dolphins, I think this was a really good deal. We talked about a lot in the matchmaker was who's Miami going to sign, this big fancy toy. Are they going to go trade for somebody? Are they going to sign one of these big names in the free agency? Or are they going to draft somebody? They did none of the above. They just brought everybody back. And that was okay. Why Miami was one of the big candidates for getting somebody is because every one of them was a free agent. And they brought every one of them back. And I think this was really smart because Miami got put in this position where it was just next man up, and kind of like the San Francisco coaching tree, where it's just the next running back up, next running back up. And they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket, because if he goes down, the chance of replacing them is pretty unlikely. Where they were signing Raheem Mostert to a 2-year deal, $7.6 million. Jeff Wilson, 2-year, $8.2 million, and Myles Gaskins to a 1-year deal. So they brought them all back, and it's kind of for fantasy. I'm going to give this a C, in a sense that it's, you know what? I'll go a B. I'll stick with my guy. I'll go C. So I think it's a C in the fact that for Miami as a team, this was a really, really good deal. Like that for them to bring these guys back on the cheap side, and it's kind of revolving door. They all kind of bring a similar attribute in a sense, and they're all familiar with the offense. They're all running the offense last year. But as a fantasy manager, trying to figure out who you want and who you're going to call your shot on the draft season is going to be very difficult and very confusing. It might be one of those situations where if you hit right, it's going to be fantasy gold. But if you hit wrong, it might cost you a lot. Like I imagine these guys are probably going to go somewhere in the, if I had to guess, probably 6th through 8th round. So if it's in the 8th round, it's the investment isn't that high. But it's one of those ones where we've been saying it for years in San Francisco. If you have the San Francisco running back, you're going to do fine. And I feel like that's going to be a similar sentiment here with Miami. So I'm going to give it a C. Miami, this was a really good deal for you. But for fantasy football, this is going to be a C. Zach, do you want to talk about your signing here? This one, I was going to highlight this one to talk about, but I was pretty happy you jumped on board this one so I can share my 2 cents with you.
Yeah, you bet. So Miles Sanders signed what I believe to be the biggest free agent contract this season for any of the running backs. It is a 4-year, $25.5 million contract. And the reason why I picked this one is because he's going to a team in the Carolina Panthers that just traded it away, its primary offensive weapon in DJ Moore. And they're going to be bringing in a rookie quarterback with the 101 in April. So I see Sanders as being the focal point of their offense, at least to start the year, while they get this rookie quarterback up to speed with their offense and the NFL game. Sanders is coming off a career year just shy of 5 yards per carry, about 1,200 yards on the ground and 11 touchdowns. So he produced when it mattered, that being a contract year for him. And hopefully for the Panthers' sake, Sanders can continue similar production and really take the some of the stress and pressure off of whether it's CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, and allow him to just gradually take over that team. And sorry, that was an A grade for Sanders and the Panthers.
I totally agree. This is a guy I just wish I had more shares of. I actually traded Miles Sanders away, I think 2 years ago. And now looking at it, like he has not do I think he is the skill level of Christian McCaffrey? No. But he's going to have every opportunity like Christian McCaffrey. He can catch the ball, and he is an explosive running back. We just never seen him outside of a timeshare or limited control in Philadelphia. So I'm super excited about this one, Zach, and I couldn't agree more with you. I think that's an A+ signing right there. Going through a couple here, Rashad Penny signs with Philadelphia. One leaves, one comes back. This is an interesting one too because Rashad Penny might be worth a little flyer. I know he's never healthy, and when he is healthy, he produces. When he's not, it's obviously he's done for what seems like the remainder of the season. This one might be a little bit of an interesting one, replacing there. I know they did re-sign Boston Scott as well too, but Rashad Penny might be worth a little bit of a flyer in your later rounds because when he's on the field, he might be getting some of that goal line work. Who knows what the Kenny Gainwell shares are going to be like, but a guy like this that's coming into that system, I might be worth a little bit of a late flyer. Chicago Bears they signed Travis Homer to a 2-year deal. More of like, I guess he was kind of more of a depth piece / special teams returner in Seattle. So we'll see what his role turns into in Chicago. But mentioning Chicago, I picked this one pretty quick because this one caught me off guard, especially as a Lions fan. I knew there was negotiations happening with Detroit and with Jamal Williams. And as a Lions fan, I was uncomfortable with what the numbers were being thrown around at Jamal Williams. I know he's a huge locker room guy and a huge personality and a big time leader on that team. But a 28 turning 29-year-old running back that has had, I would say, average numbers per carry, but had a substantial amount of touchdowns because Detroit had an unusual amount of touchdowns within the 5-yard line, which an incredibly amount of unusual numbers. So the numbers that were being thrown around at Jamal Williams was very, very high for somebody I feel like that's not going to be on the team for the entire duration of the contract. When you could use some of that money and go get somebody better. Now, did I think Detroit was going to go out and make a flashy sign? No, I did not. But there is, if you pay attention to football at all, especially fantasy football, and if you're a Detroit Lions fan, you know where I'm coming from, there seems to be this, disconnect between DeAndre Swift and this coaching staff. If you remember back to when DeAndre Swift was drafted, it was not this coaching staff. It was not this regime that signed DeAndre Swift. And adding to that pile is the fact that DeAndre Swift has not been able to stay healthy. They've been trying to use him between the tackles, and he's just getting banged up, where he does all of his best work outside the tackles and in the receiving game. So what's going to make this an A-sign deal for me is the signing of David Montgomery, the 3-year, $18 million deal. David Montgomery is a substantial upgrade to Jamal Williams. If you spend any time on the Detroit Lions fan pages on Facebook and Twitter, they'll tell you otherwise. They think that Jamal Williams is the God's gift to Barry Sanders running backs here, but he's not. He's not Barry Sanders. He's not. David Montgomery is a substantial upgrade from Jamal Williams to obviously David Montgomery. And I think it's very, very likely that the Detroit Lions are going to move on from Swift in the draft. I feel like there's something to be had, whether it's a trade up or a trade back and get assets or what's going to happen here. But I have a strong hunch that Swift is not going to be on the roster next year. And if he is, he's going to be used more in a third down role or, a second and long where he might be going outside the tackles. That's unfortunately not why they drafted Swift. And I think it was the very, very early second, if I remember correctly. But unfortunately, he hasn't been able to stay healthy. So you got to use the guy in an ability that's going to keep him on the field. So I think there's a lot of teams out there that still see Swift as this really high potential, really good running back. And I still see him that as fantasy as well if he was healthy. But I do have this feeling that the organization is planning to move on from him. And that's why they made this signing, 3-year, $18 million for a guy that I think is a very good running back. So A+ deal here, I think, for the Lions and for fantasy. David Montgomery could have landed on some teams that are not run first or are not a very good offense. Detroit Lions is one of the highest powered offenses in the NFL right now, and a team that really likes to run the ball, especially in the red zone. If you have David Montgomery shares, prepare for a lot of red zone touchdowns. So I like this deal a lot. Couple other small ones, I guess we can kind of go over here. Got the Chase Edmonds deal for 1 year to Tampa Bay. He was cut by Denver, signed by Tampa Bay. Deontay Foreman signed a 1 year, $3 million. This is one of those ones with Chicago. I think they're just spending money to spend money here and see if the Foreman ends up kind of finding a spot on the team there. But another one that's obviously, we talked about Jamal Williams. He left and ended up signing this deal with New Orleans Saints, a 3 year deal. This one's a sneaky one, Zach. I'm curious to see what you think about this. We talked about it in the group chat a little bit, and the Alvin Kamara situation is not going away. A, he's regressed significantly over the last couple of years, and B, he's going to miss time next year. This is going to be a 4 to 6 week is kind of the speculations of amount of time he's going to miss. Jamal Williams, we've seen him be successful to Detroit, especially in the red zone. He might be the only guy to be able to run the ball for New Orleans during that time frame. So this might be it's early before draft season, but I think ADP wise, if you're doing best ball right now, that's a guy that I might be trying to sneak up and pick shares up, because he might be that free square for a few weeks, and who knows, he might maintain that role as the goal line back in New Orleans. So I'm curious to see what you think about that one.
It's funny. It's going to be a Thunderdome of the two greatest goal line backs in the NFL right now, Jamal Williams and Taysom Hill. Like, who comes out on top for that goal line position? But all jokes aside, I do agree with you. Kamara has been on the downturn. I think we're seeing the down slide of his career, and whether or not he misses any time, I think Williams is somebody that will really serve as a really good complement and possibly surpass him on the depth chart before it's all said and done. So I do agree with both of what you said about Montgomery and Williams. I think Montgomery is an upgrade for the Lions, and I think Williams goes to a spot in New Orleans where he really fits the need that they have and that they may have increase with that forthcoming suspension.
So for that one, I'll give that one a B. I think it's a sneaky signing. I think it was obviously, like you mentioned, to fill the need for New Orleans. And I think for fantasy, it might produce a lot of value late round, kind of like what Williams was this past year, late round or undrafted, but produced a ton of value. I think it's going to be about the same. So I'm going to give that one a B signing. Moving into the wide receivers here. The first one we're going to talk about is the Las Vegas Raiders signed Jakobi Meyers to a 3 year, $33 million deal. And I'm going to maybe kickstart this one, and I'm going to cohesively put this deal together with the New England Patriots deal and the wide receiver Juju Smith Schuster to a 3 year, $33 million. And a very similar contract. I know one I think has less guaranteed money versus the other. I'm trying to remember exactly how it goes down. Zach's going to give you the whole insight, a little foreshadowing here for you in the his ice cold hot take coming up here. But I'm giving this an F. This is my F deal of the off season. And I'm curious to see what Zach has to think on this one. But for me, it's the exact, theoretically, it's the same amount of money. Same player, same amount of money, same year, 3 years, $33 million. The New England offense is a very difficult offense to operate. There's a lot of times you've seen where the old veteran wide receivers try and sign on with New England. They go into camp, and it's just like complete chess work. They don't know what's going on, and then they never make it. Or they get cut, or they release, or they retire, or whatever. It's a difficult offense to operate, and it always has been. And when you have a guy like Jakobi that knows the offense and is an incredible leader in the locker room, and to me, Juju Smith, Jakobi Meyers, who's a better wide receiver, I'm leaning towards Jakobi Meyers. Whatever side of the fence you lean on, it is what it is. But Juju Smith is come off of injuries. He is not the wide receiver he was in his rookie season, his sophomore season, and he does not know the offense. And to me, I think Jakobi Meyers is a better wide receiver. I think he's a more talented wide receiver, and he's a guy that was a huge locker room presence for the team and understands the offense. So to me, giving up the exact same amount of money for a guy that you could have just retained that meant so much to the organization, I think was a mistake. There's other deals that maybe were worse deals for these guys that are probably not going to land on their team. But for the organization like New England, I think this was a big mistake. I don't want to put you on the spot now, Zach, because I know you're going to talk about it later on in the episode. But I think this was a big mistake. Not that getting Juju Smith Schuster was a mistake, but I think it was a mistake in allocating that dollar amount to a guy that you could have retained. That was a monumental piece of the organization. So I'm giving that one. That's my F signing of the 2023 season. The next one here, we got Alan Lazard. Let's hear what you got to say on that one, Zach.
So I'm attacking this one with the pen of a scorned teacher. I don't think this is a very good signing for the Jets. Personally, I'm somebody that if you kind of put the screws to me and you kind of like force my hand to do something, I'm the kind of guy that's going to do it probably, but I want to really hold it against you. And I think that's what we're seeing right now with the Jets and with Rodgers. If it wasn't for Rodgers bringing the band with him from Green Bay, I don't think the Jets would have ever come close to a 4-year, $44 million contract for Alan Lazard. I think that's a lot of money to give up for a 2, but likely a 3 option, a number 3 option on your offense behind Wilson and shoot the running back there from last year, Breece Hall. Thank you. That's a lot of money, a lot of guaranteed money, $22 million guaranteed. So I don't like the optics of Rodgers being like, you have to get me these guys for me to come to you. Nothing wrong with Lazard though. He is a good player. Finished the year with 60 receptions, 788 yards and 6 TDs. But I just don't think that contract matches what he's able to produce. And the fact that Rodgers is really putting it to the Jets right now to bring in those pieces is I think kind of a poor thing for him to do. And there was reports that Randall Cobb was getting interest from the Jets, and it's only a matter of time before like Jordy Nelson and Donald Driver and Greg Jennings putting the team on his back, signs with the Jets too. So
yeah,
I gave that one a D. Not an F, but gave that one a D.
It just seems so bizarre. Like that was not an area of need at all. And like they have Corey Davis, who, say what you want about Corey Davis, he could be a flop of a first round pick. You can say that, but he's become a very feasible wide receiver for that offense and a depth piece and a big body type guy. Like he like that was not a position. And you got Elijah Moore, who was a little bit of disgruntled wide receiver this past season, but was a high draft pick as well. Like that's not an area of need for them to put that much money into something just because you want to possibly bring in this. Like what happens now if Rodgers doesn't come? You know what I mean? Like it's then you just buried all this money into a wide receiver when you need a quarterback or there's other areas on your team you need to fill. But I see where you're coming from, Zach. I see where you're coming from.
You got to think one of those two guys gets moved, whether it's Davis or Moore.
Yeah.
Likely Davis, just because him and Lazard fill a very similar niche on a roster. But then again, Moore will probably bring back a better return in the trade market for sure.
Well, I've already seen the rumors that he's a cut candidate and Corey Davis, but that doesn't mean Elijah Moore and I might not be on the move either here too, right? Like it's still the offseason is still very young and a guy that's been, like we said, disgruntled this past season. So it's the NFL's a weird thing, and when it comes draft season can do some weird things to some weird teams. So the Miami Dolphins, talking about actually the New York Jets, they could not come to a contract agreement with Braxton Berrios. This is a real minor one, but he ends up signing a 1-year deal with Miami. I could see that one being very much a special teams or a depth signing there as well. Not a lot to talk about, but this one was an interesting one. Minnesota Vikings end up releasing Adam Thielen, and then he goes on to sign another deal. We talked about this a little bit, Zach, but this is one that you wanted to kind of maybe dive into a little bit deeper.
Yeah, so Thielen is going into his age 33 year. And he signed a 3-year contract with the Panthers. It's interesting because you don't see many receivers play late into their 30s or even into the middle of their 30s with much success. So 3 years, I think that's quite a bit, or rather, quite the commitment to make to Thielen. But I think right now at this point in the offseason, the Panthers may not have had many choices. They did bring in Chark, but I think he left without a contract. So I think bringing Thielen in for this year, for 1 year, would have been a really savvy play by the Panthers. Somebody that, even though over the past 3 years his stats have dipped each of the years, is still a very serviceable receiver. Caught 70 balls for 716 yards last season with the Vikings. And he could very well become, whether it's whichever quarterback they draft, he could become their best friend for the rookie season. Somebody with reliable hands that can make plays over the middle and outside. But I think the term and the money that he was given makes this one a C for me. I think they may have overstretched a little bit for what they're likely going to see in return.
This is just coming out of left field. Not that I disagree with you there, but just talking about Minnesota here. Him leaving is such a vote of confidence for TJ Hawkinson this upcoming year, because it was two guys in the red zone. Who was going to get the touchdowns, Hawkinson or Thielen? That was where Thielen made all of his money last year, was in the red zone. So I think this is a really good thing for TJ Hawkinson this upcoming year. But I don't know if you saw this. I saw it on Twitter probably about like a half hour before we started recording. Did you see the rumors that Minnesota all of a sudden became a front runner to get Lamar Jackson?
It's funny you mentioned that. There's a number of guys on Twitter that I get like the notifications when they tweet. And this afternoon alone, there's been Jeremy Fowler and Dan Graziano have both listed the Patriots and the Vikings as potential Lamar destinations. It may be a 306.
No kidding. I just put that together. That's outstanding.
Yeah.
All I thought was just, please, like the Michael Scott meme. Please, God, no, please, no.
Yeah.
Like, just when I think the division is up. Not that I think like, okay, like Lamar not coming to Detroit, whatever, it is what it is. But don't come interdivision. Like, the division is up for grabs right now. Like, it's sitting there. And if Lamar goes to Minnesota, that is not good. Like, that is just not good for Detroit. Go somewhere in the AFC. Like, go to the AFC or Detroit.
I experienced that tilt last year around this time, where I finished up period 1 at school and kind of peeked at my phone, and I saw that Tyreek Hill was in talks with the Jets and the Dolphins, and just full tilt. Like,
no,
the two
please.
teams, it doesn't matter. Just like
or Buffalo. You can't go there either, but like go somewhere else. Go to like Tampa or something. You know?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, it's just brutal. Two more real quick ones here, and then we'll get into our ice cold hot takes. So this one's are the tight ends. The one, Robert Tonyan, this one was a bit of a head scratcher, because I know if you were last year, tight end darling, last late round pick was Cole Kmet, and then he struggled out the gates but came on strong towards the end there. But the tight end Robert Tonyan signed a 1-year deal with Chicago Bears. So I'm curious on what type of double tight offense maybe this team is going to be looking at running this year. But and then the New England Patriots also signed tight end Mike Gesicki to a 1-year, $4.5 million deal. And I kind of like this deal quite a bit for New England. They still have Henry. They end up moving on from bear with me, sorry. End up moving on from thank you, Juju Smith, and now bringing in Gesicki, and he's not much of a blocker, but he has a very good receiving tight end, especially in the red zone. So just adding a bigger body and another capable wide or receiving target, I guess, for Mac Jones. I didn't mind this deal, but obviously you as a Patriots fan might have a different insight. But $4.5 million is drastically less than what he was getting paid for on his franchise tag last year.
Yeah, this one was some internet sleuthing by some of the guys on the Patriots beat. Classic 2023. Gesicki followed Mac Jones on Instagram, or they swapped the follows, and Gesicki started following the Pats. I think it was, I want to say Wednesday night. All this kind of came out, and from there, everybody speculated that this deal was going to get done. And yeah, sure enough, I think 2 days later, Friday morning, Gesicki put pen to paper. So
yeah, here we are.
Funny how that happens. I do agree though. I do like this signing. I think he'll end up being like a big slot more than a inline tight end.
Yeah.
Which is fine. Threaten the seams. That's great. Interesting. Bill O'Brien, the new offensive coordinator for the Pats, recruited Gesicki coming out of high school to play at Penn State. So going back, there's been some mutual interest between the OC and the player. One thing that we haven't mentioned though is around 4:00 today, I saw that Schultz signed similar contract, 1 year, $9 million with the Texans.
Oh, I did not see that. Well, he should have went to Chicago, or he should have went to Cincinnati. I would have been right. I think Arvin got that one right. We won't tell him.
Yeah, I think that's like the only thing that either of you guys got right. So.
Oh yeah, we're off to a hot start here. I think I got the no, never mind. I was gonna say I think I got the didn't I get the quarterback one right? I think I got the Jimmy Garoppolo to Vegas one, didn't I?
Oh, I'd have to check, but
that
I know that you guys both got Lamar correct, so good job.
Yeah, that's a hot start.
Yeah.
Hashtag insiders. Talking about insiders here, big sponsor for the 306 Fantasy Football Podcast during the Super Bowl season. They've done it twice now for us. And that's Fresh Air Experience. And the insider is, if you're not familiar with Fresh Air Experience, legendary 60/40 sale. It's the last week of the 60/40 sale. And getting your hands down on there, whether you need a new winter jacket, even some of the fall jackets are on sale. Last year during the winter and the summer, I got my hands on some extra discs. I'm a disc golf player, so I got my hands on a couple extra of those for a nice little bargain. My wife went down there. She got a new jacket. It's if you're not familiar with the 60/40 sale, I'd be getting down there and finding yourself a nice little discount at Fresh Air Experience. They have bikes, kayaks, paddle boards, all types. Very, very popular in the summertime. A lot of people are finding their way down there, especially for bikes. But they have the skis, cross-country skis, snowboards, all the above as well too. So yeah, if you're an outdoorsy type person, this is definitely the store for you, with a lot of really nice clothing and apparel as well too. So find your way down there and catch a bargain during the 60/40 sale, and that's on Central Avenue in Prince Albert. They have other locations across the province as well too, but I'm not familiar with the 60/40 sale. And to be frank, they didn't sponsor us, so the PA is getting the shout out on this one. So that being said, we'll kind of transition here. And our very first is supposed to be Armin, but just because of the the situation we're in here, Zach is kickstarting ice cold hot takes for the 2023 offseason.
Yeah, I think before.
You're not on fire, Ricky Bobby. I'm on fire.
All right, I'm gonna cut you off there, Zach.
Yeah, no problem. Out of practice here with the intro for the ice cold hot takes. I was going to say before, when I lived in PA, I think between the grocery store and the beer store, the next number one place where my money went was Fresh Air. Spent a lot of money there.
Good customer service too. Good people, like really good people. You can find yourself in there for like a 40-minute conversation, just visiting. Didn't even buy a single thing. You're just visiting.
Yeah, I think there's a few times where, especially in the winter, I'd go try to buy a disc and would kind of start talking about, well, it's kind of hard to throw and stuff and in the snow, and I'd leave with like a Marin wool hoodie or some new socks too.
Yeah, it's without fail, that's for sure.
So my ice cold hot take here, as you alluded to earlier, goes a little something like Jakobi Meyers and Juju Smith Schuster both received similar deals. Juju actually replacing Jakobi in New England. I think right now, as it stands, both players will be more impactful for their new teams than they were for their previous teams. So even though Jakobi was a very impactful player during his time in New England, he didn't offer much in regards to big plays, especially not with yards after the catch. Juju, I think, is going to be a more athletic, a more dynamic player with the ball in his hands for the Pats. And with that said, he's going to really provide a upgrade in Yak. Last year, Smith Schuster had 465 yak yards, while Jakobi only had 236. That put Juju good for 5th in the league in yak yards. He is somebody that can get the ball in his hands, either behind or just past the line of scrimmage, and he can make plays with it. That wasn't Jakobi's game. Maybe that's why I like Jakobi so much, because that was my game in high school: catch the ball and fall down and try to pick up an extra yard. But I think Smith Schuster is going to bring something to the Pats offense that they haven't had since Edelman, which will hopefully make the life of Mac Jones quite a bit easier. Now with Meyers, I think Meyers will provide the Raiders with a over the middle, just steady Eddie chain mover. And for Meyers, I think it's going to be nice because for once he isn't going to be getting the other team's number one corner or the premier attention of the defense. So I think there's a chance where he could really have a nice little season, especially now with Waller gone as well. No longer will he be getting the stud corner or help over the top with the number 2 corner. All eyes, as long as Adams is still there, all eyes will be on Adams. And I think Jakobi will be a nice safety blanket for Garoppolo.
That's he's going to replace the his name's escaping me here. Third and Renfro, everybody used to say Hunter Renfro, I think.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting what Hunter Renfro's situation will be coming in there, because I kind of see the same. Obviously, I shared what I think of Jakobi Meyers. I think he's a very good wide receiver, so it'll be interesting to see what his role will replace in Hunter Renfro, especially with the leaving of Darren Waller. There's definitely a hole to fill there for that team moving forward.
Yeah, as soon as Meyers signed in Las Vegas, all the Patriot guys on Twitter were like, oh, "There's McDaniels, Edelman, and Amendola from like the mid 2010s. Like both those guys play similar positions, but if you have them both run option routes, Jimmy G should be able to pick apart some offenses or pick apart some defenses.
More than likely pick apart his own offense than some defenses there, Zach, maybe based on the trajectory of his career so far. Anything else you want to add here, Zach, or this one? I know there's a lot of this isn't the most, fancy or luxurious or, entertaining maybe to the point of episodes where there's just a lot to cover when that first little bit of free agency. I know this is definitely one of your favorite times of year, but anything you want to add to the episode before we wrap this one up?
No, just I think this next month leading up to the draft should be lots of fun. We saw this weekend Cooks got moved, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's 2 or 3 more kind of trades like that coming down the pipe, especially with these veteran receivers. So hopefully one of them ends up in New England.
Yeah, there's still 2 big quarterback sagas to conclude, whether that be Lamar Jackson ending up somewhere or signing that 1-year deal, I guess, or the franchise tag deal. And then obviously Aaron Rodgers could still be on the move. We have Austin Eckler that possibly could be moved or signing a deal. I kind of foreshadowed or hinted at something I think Swift's going to happen. So there's a lot of time between now and the draft, and even during the draft, that some fun stuff might happen. And this is, for most people that play fantasy, it's the draft and the season itself. But if you're a dynasty manager, this is a really fun time. Maybe if you're just an NFL fan and you're just listening, but this is a fun time because there's a lot of stuff happening and a lot of speculations on where guys are landing, how this is going to impact your team, your division, your team's chances. Dynasty, you're trying to create those buy low, sell high type windows, and it's going to build your franchise or your team moving into the upcoming season. So it's a lot of fun for us. I know I'm chomping at the bit to get everybody to pay up their fees, and so I can start getting into the dynasty trades here. I got a couple lined up already with high risk, high reward kind of thing moving into the season. But that's going to do it for us for episode number 83 here and our free agency report card. Shout out to Armand and his fam jam. They're hoping everything's moving smoothly for them and things are well, and we can see him back on the podcast here in the next 2 weeks. And obviously thanks to Zach and thanks to you guys at home and on our sponsors this week as well too. So take care, everybody. Talk soon. Episode number 84 dropping soon.